Hi there, it's Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com here with this week's episode of the Market Monday. This week we're going to talk about Core Set 2020 and the financial value of the cards that are spoiled so far and where I think this set is headed. So I particularly like core sets because this one's especially, even compared to last year's core set, this one is sandwiched in between some goodies. So we have War of the Spark, we have Modern Horizon, we have Commander sets that are going to come out in August, and I think that this one, unless it has some bonkers value in it, is going to be forgotten, and it allows these type of cards to accrue in value. Now, this set will follow every other set. That it will get opened for its draft season and its sealed season, and the prices will plummet. And then I think they have time to accrue value where people will go back to War of the Spark, possibly even the Ravnica Legions or Guilds of Ravnica, and then they'll be on to shinier things when the August Commander set comes out. And then we have a lot of other products like Gideon Spellbooks. So what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of products competing with Core Set 2020 for people's wallets. So let's just get onto the spoilers. I'm going to talk about kind of the card analysis of these cards and where they fit, maybe some other cards that these will eventually go in those decks or maybe even spring up other decks. So let's go on to the first one, Ajani Strength of Pride. This is a very, very interesting card because I am a Soul Sisters player, and I actually think this is a playable Planeswalker in Soul Sisters. So Soul Sisters has had a hard time fitting a Planeswalker. They've played basically every Planeswalker known to man in that slot for the four-drop slot. The new one out of Modern Horizons is also interesting and more of a spirits or a flying base build, but I'll talk about that one another day. Giant Strength of Pride, though, does seem like it fits very well in Soul Sisters. So the text is probably quite hard for you to read, but the +1 is you gain life equal to the number of creatures you control plus the number of planeswalkers you control. The -2 is create a 2/2 Ajani Pridemate token. And the zeros, if you have at least 15 more than your starting life total, you exile Ajani Strength of Pride and each artifact and creature your opponents control. So it's basically a one-sided board wipe with Ajani. And I've ran cards like Wrath of God in the past in Soul Sisters because there are decks that you have to deal with your opponent's creatures, and this one also hits artifacts. So I'm thinking this card will see play, and the shell, of course, is going to be Soul Sisters. So all of the cards that surrounding Soul Sisters are going to be very lucrative as potential pickups. So not a lot of cards in the Soul Sisters archetype are worth a lot of money anyway, but looking at cards that have the potential, I think Serra Ascendant is the one that really comes to mind. At Martyr of the Sands was just reprinted. I don't think that one is going to go up in value, but you could see other cards like the Arctic Champion go up in value, and even Ranger of Eos or the new Ranger out of Modern Horizons that pair well with the Ajani because they can go get the Martyr. I think getting that life total up 15 life higher than you're starting is very, very important for this particular card. And I do think that it might breathe some new life into Soul Sisters. It's one of the harder parts of Soul Sisters was controlling the more degenerate creature-based decks that can get out of hand. They still have a lot of problems with the non-creature-based decks that aren't trying to combo off, but the artifact is quite interesting with the Ajani Strength of Pride. So I think this card will be highly sought after. I think $15 is the right price point. I think that's what it's pre-selling for. About $15. But I think this one does have potential even in the current format for Standard because there is just tons of life gain, and it seems like they've been attaching life gain on many cards from Ravnica Allegiance and even Guilds of Ravnica to combat burn. So a card like this getting 15 above your starting life total, think about right now in a white-green tokens, that's very, very doable. It's also very doable in an Explorer-based strategy to then just exile your opponent's board. So like this card, I think the 15 is probably right. It could go up in value. I wouldn't even fault you for the pre-ordering these if they get under like the 12 range. I think that's very, very smart for this particular card. In the decks that it will see play, it probably will see play as 4 ofs, believe it or not. I think it's a very, very powerful ability in the right shell. It has everything. It protects itself. It has a way to gain life. It has ability to get up to that plus 15 life just by itself. If you are running in a tokens-based strategy, for example, you then just throw out a Ajani plus a couple times, and then you're ready to zero a Ajani. All right, let's go on to the Chandras. These were spoiled a while ago. I don't even know where these are going to be in the set. Usually if they're in a Planeswalker deck, they'll have the number after the 280, so we'll say like 281. So I'm assuming these will just be in the set itself. So this is kind of a setup for the Netflix series, in my opinion. They're going to be doing, probably showcasing a Planeswalker like this in all the sets to come. The uncommon one is very interesting with elemental creatures getting +2/+0, and there's some other elemental creatures that has been spoiled. Elemental Tribal actually seems like it could be a thing. Now it's a stretch. They're very, very efficient decks right now in Standard, but come post rotation, it's kind of the Wild West, and I don't know where elementals will fall in this list. So it's a 5 loyalty Planeswalker, 4 mana, elemental creatures. You control it +2/+0 with a plus. It has a -1 to be able to add to ramp. That might be interesting if there's a 6 or a 7 drop to ramp into, or it's just a nice little way to cast a lightning strike to then protect Chandra. The -2 is it deals 2 damage to any target, which can also protect. Again, this does feel more like a limited card. It doesn't seem to have the power level there, but it's interesting nonetheless with those 3 abilities. The Chandra Accolade of Flame, the 3 mana for 4. Loyalty, you put a loyalty on each red Planeswalker control, including Chandra for the 0. Another 0 is to create 2 1/1 red elemental creature tokens. They gain haste and sacrifice them at the beginning of next end step. So you can see that Chandra into Chandra isn't that terrible of a plan by creating 2 3/1s. It's a little bit of a stretch to then protect a Planeswalker, but interesting nonetheless. And the -2 is you may cast target instant or sorcery card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard. If that card would be put in the graveyard, then exile it. So it gives you more fuel for those lightning strikes, wizards, lightnings, and whatnot. So this one I do think is very playable in the current format, with just -2ing a couple times, then being able to put more loyalty counters, and every card basically in your graveyard. It feels like another Experimental Frenzy risk factor type card. We already have a slew of cards, but I mean, rotation wise, they all stick around too, so it's going to be competing with those slots. I think this one I'm not. I don't know where this one would end up, but $4 is probably right with the Chandra. What do they have Chandra going at right now? Yeah, they have $8. I think this is way too rich for this card, as it has more potential to go down than go up. Many times rares out of these type of sets, especially in this day and age, have a hard time going up even the $3 mark, let alone $8-9. So I know people will say, well, what about Teferi? What about I guess Karn at the moment? That's mainly the having Modern have such a demand for those cards, creating that rather than a big unknown like Chandra Accolade of Flame. All right, so then we have Chandra Awakened Inferno, which is a 6 mana for 6, which can't be countered, which is actually very relevant right now with Dovin's Veto and other cards having a big share of the meta. If we go post-rotation, we could see a resurgence in the Surveil, the Dimir Surveil deck, which has a ton of counterspells. Ionize still sticks around. A lot of very, very good absorb counterspells that survive post-rotation. The +2 is each opponent gets an emblem with at the beginning of your upkeep. It deals 1 damage to you, so it can be a win condition. Just a few ticks up, and you're going to be dishing off a lot of tax per turn to slowly wheedle down your opponent. -3 is it deals 3 damage to each non-elemental creature, so you can cast Chandra and hopefully sort of wipe the board. However, as in this day and age, up by the time you get to a 6 mana Planeswalker, there's most likely creatures that have toughness greater than 3. So I don't know how I feel about Chandra's -3. The -X deals X damage to target creature or Planeswalker. If a permanent dealt this damage would die this turn, it gets exiled. So there's kind of the one that maybe there is a surviving card that you need to dish off a lot of damage to. I mean, it can dish off 5 damage and then survive and then start ticking up with the +2. So this is a card, though, if you can protect for a few turns, can definitely protect the board and start to really dish off the damage. So it does feel like a complete Planeswalker with the ability to protect itself, the ability to be a win condition, and eke out some card advantage. All right, so then we have the next spoiler, is just Chandra's Spitfire. I don't know where this one falls in this current age. It does seem quite powerful in like a mono red shell, but I don't know if mono red has any room for it. With flying, whenever an opponent is dealt non-combat damage, it gets +3/+0 until end of turn. So you can chain off some cards that dish off a damage or 2, or even like a lightning strike. This ends up being a 4/3 flying. I don't know, again, if that's like better than a gutter snipe, which we already have available. Typically this 3 mana is what makes these cards unplayable, because it's the 3 mana is where you're trying to play like Chain Whirlers, you're trying to play a bunch of other cards that are more high impact, this sort of ability is relegated for your 1s and 2 drops to dish off some additional damage per casting spells or doing damage or whatnot. So Chandra Spitfire I don't think saw much play, if any at all, when it was printed, and I believe M10 or M11 was the last time it was printed. This is a reprint. But it's interesting nonetheless. All right, then we have the next mythic, red mythic with the Cavalier of Flame. This is a 5 mana for a 6/5, so it's already above its little curve here. And then creatures you control get +1/+0 and haste for 2 mana, which is relevant in a red deck. It can give itself haste if you draw it late game for 7 mana for a 6, or at that point it'd be a 7/5 haster. And then when it enters the battlefield, you can discard any number of cards and draw that many cards. So this is definitely going to have some demand from the commander scene. And when the Cavalier of Flame dies, it deals X damage to each opponent and each planeswalker, where X is the number of land cards in your graveyard. So we're having kind of this land strategy. Of course, if you dish off discarding a bunch of cards, land cards from your hand, this can give this a little bit of an advantage of then when it's dying. Of course, this could seem some sort of modern deck that utilizes Faithless Looting, throwing lands in the graveyard, then chucking this out, then having this die. But I think that's a bit of a stretch for something that's 5 mana. However, Commander is going to love this card as well, with having both the lands themes with Lord Windgrace, as well as the just the wheel type effect. It's going to go in a lot of decks just for that. Plenty of Grixis decks, plenty of red decks want the draw type effects. All right, so then we go on to the legendary artifact with Chandra's Regulators. 2 mana whenever you activate a loyalty ability of Chandra Planeswalker, you may pay 1. If you do copy that ability, you may choose new targets. So this is really good with some of the Chandras that have very broken abilities. And it also does have an ability to loot mountains, so or whatever the opposite loot. Discard a mountain card or a red card to draw a card. So mountain or red card to draw a card. So pretty good for... Again, if you're going to be running Chandras, there is a popular Chandra in red at the moment, and activating its +1. Yeah, all these Chandras that are printed right now and the Chandras exist, I think this is actually pretty good. I could see play in Standard. You can loot. It has the ability to basically discard multiple copies, so it gets around its kind of drawback of Legendary. Commander's going to love this, and Oathbreaker, of course, is going to absolutely love this in Chandra decks. So I think Chandra's Regulator at the $3 range is probably about right where this card will settle, probably a little bit lower at first when it starts to get crushed with the limited environment putting out too much supply for the Commander or the Oathbreaker to kind of eat up that supply. But I think long term, you're going to see this in thousands of Oathbreaker decks once we start to get a better idea of how the Oathbreaker is going to affect the market. And of course, this one with 3 Chandras, meaning that 3 Chandras have the potential of seeing Oathbreaker decks, I'm very bullish on this card. Let's go on to Chandra's Embercat with a tap, add red your mana pool to spend this only to cast elementals or Chandras, where you're seeing that this is ramping to Chandras. We have a 2-drop Chandra right now. A little bit of a stretch, but again, Oathbreaker. It's a pretty good card for that. Common, though. It's going to get crushed with the amount of supply there. So we have some other things with the ley lines being reprinted. This is not a reprint. Leyline of Combustion is new. It's a 4-mana ley line. If it's an open hand, you put on your battlefield, which with the new Mulligan rule is going to be very, very good. And whenever you and or at least one permanent you control becomes a target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, it deals 2 damage to that player. So it kind of gives the effect that... I'm trying to think of the card. Not the Ash Zealot. There was a card that had this exact Mind Spark Elemental. Whenever it was targeted, it does 2 damage. This is pretty good with creatures you want to either dish off damage, so again, burn. If they target your Monastery Swift Spears or something like that, they at least take 2 damage. Again, I don't know where this is going to... It's definitely going to be good in sideboard, in Modern versus like Jund and things that do target your early drops. When you're... Yeah, a lot of those even pushed over more towards burn. I don't know if this fits in Modern, but it's going to be definitely a good card for cyber cards for Standard. Dragon Mage is a reprint. They're dumbing this down from a rare to a uncommon. It does hold some value right now, so that's interesting, but of course this is going to crush it. Whenever it deals combat damage, you wheel. So this typically has gone in any sort of Dragon Tribal-based strategy. It was really good in the... I'm trying to think of the card that brings out the Angel, Demon, or when it attacks Kali the Vast. When it attacks, you put in a dragon into play. This is a popular card in that deck. It probably will hold value long term, so I think that you should start picking these up in the bulk bins when they go down to 5 cents. Pick these up, hold them on 2-3 years down the road. They could hit $1 again. Flame Sweep is one of the FNM promos. When it deals 2 damage, Flame Sweep deals 2 damage to each creature except for creatures you control with flying. Interesting because you could theoretically build a flying deck with Flame Sweep being a one-sided board wipe. Goblin Ringleader is also very interesting for the Goblin tribe in Modern. This is a card that has seen play before in Legacy. It's a 4-mana for a 2/2, and whenever it's the battlefield, reveal the top 4 cards of your library. Put all Goblin cards revealed this way into your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library. So it's another way to fill back up after you've been wiped, or if you're playing like a lot of 1-for-1s, Fatal Pushing and Path of Exiling. Goblin Ringleader can help you fill back up and have that one shot. Infuriate's another +3/+2 until end of turn. Feather decks might get a bump. However, I don't know if it's really going to push any of those decks over the top. Dread Presence. Whenever swamp enters the battlefield under your control, you choose one, you draw a card and lose 1 life, or deals 2 damage to any target and you gain 2 life. So this is a very interesting card, as the choice is whenever the swamp enters the battlefield. So you don't have to pick a mode when you cast this card like we've seen on cards of the past. So I actually like this card quite a bit. It is a creature. I wish this was an enchantment or something that stick around a lot easier. 3 toughness is very, very vulnerable in today's format. You don't get advantage until the next turn when you can actually put a swamp out. But it does have that ability to draw cards and lose life and then gain that life back. I think commander decks are definitely going to want this card. Oathbreaker decks are definitely going to want this card, as it does seem pretty powerful. And then in decks that can cheat out lands, like put an extra swamp into play, or paired with green, of course, when you can go circuitous route for some swamps, you're going to be gaining some life. So this card will be very popular regardless if it sees standard play in the various EDH decks. Land of the Void going to reprint. This card is a insanely expensive card right now, so this being reprinted in the format could definitely hurt Dreadhorde decks at the moment. Any sort of graveyard recursion decks now don't have to worry about Land of the Voids, which is pretty decent for standard. I think that deck was starting to take a big deal of the meta. And then, of course, Modern this sees an insane amount of play. So this is another one of those cards that you want to wait for it to have what happened to both Crucible Worlds and Scapeshift and Omniscience. Wait for this card to be crushed and then start picking up these copies like crazy. The next one is the Scheming Symmetry. Choose 2 target players. Each of them searches their library for a card, then puts it on top. We have some interesting cards in Standard right now that can mill the top card of their library. So you can effectively use this as a one-sided Vampiric Tutor if you have a way to get a card off your opponent's top of the library. Another one that this seems pretty interesting and for Modern is for Lantern Control decks as a way to tutor up exactly what they need, whether it be like an Ensnaring Bridge, whether it be like a Karn, and you're just going to be milling the top card of your opponent's library. Is a little bit harder than your own library, though. But there is ways that you can set this up. And yeah, pretty interesting there. And of course, you can do that. Yeah, they'd get the opportunity to draw it before you do, though. So that's some food for thought. All right, so Disfigure's coming back, which is good news. Instant speed -2 is probably very welcome for the format. It's very aggressive. It's a way that could take care of some of the red decks right now, the efficient red cards. Reprint isn't uncommon. That's interesting because I don't know if it's been, I think, printed too many times in the scope of things. Let's just check it out real quick, how many times Disfigure has been printed to see if this could actually hold some value or have some value. So Disfigure is Zendikar, Masters 25, and a couple dual decks. So the supply's not actually that crazy for this particular card. Yeah, just as common in Zendikar and 25. I don't know. I still think it's a hard time to go above 25 cents for this Disfigures that come out of the set. Of course, it's a promo pack. Promo packs are replacing F&M promos, that's correct. All right, so then there's a Thought Distortion. 6 mana, the spell can't be countered. Target opponent reveals their hand. You exile non-creature, non-land cards from the player's hand. I think I only see this in sideboard and in some very rare cases. Like if we get into a meta where you can go to turn 6 quite... if there's not a huge portion of the meta being aggressive, this is a decent sideboard card also versus like the... No, because those use creatures. I was going to say the Merfolk Branchwalker deck, but they use a ton of creature-based cards rather than a huge majority of the being non-creatures. But again, Teferi decks is a decent sideboard card against. So I'm not going to go too much over the uncommons. The Fenlurker is a 1/1. When there's a battlefield, opponent exiles a card from their hand, so it's just strictly better than like a Relentless Rats. And then it has the Shade type effect of being able to pump up. So it is better than Relentless Rats, however, or not Relentless Rats, Ravenous Rats. However, yeah, it's going to be a stretch for this to see in a lot of decks, especially due to the double black. I don't know how Modern would... Yeah, I don't think any sort of Modern Devotion deck would want this either, other than just an interesting 2-drop for that particular deck. We have the Elemental. This one turns your lands into 5/5s and gives them haste. 6 mana for 5/5. This is very filler. In my opinion, it's just too much of a mana dump to make this actually viable. Thrashing Bronton is getting a reprint. That's interesting for the card. Of course, this will definitely crash the price of Thrashing Bronton down to nothing. This also, Thrashing Bronton, I believe, was in the the decks, the dual decks. So yeah, this card's done for. They're bringing back the hate cards. So Veil of Summer, a 1 mana, draw a card. If an opponent casts a blue or black spell this turn, spells you control cannot be countered from this turn to you, and permanents you control gain hexproof. So this is like did this card exist before? This wasn't the particular one. I'm trying to think of the card. Veil of Summer. Nope. Okay, so this should show it in the reference here. From Mythic Explorer, looks like, yeah, Autumn's Veil. This is just the fixed version of Autumn's Veil. So this is kind of interesting, though, they're bringing back hate-specific cards, because not too long ago they said that they weren't going to be printing these particular cards, especially in Standard. They hosed out, the enemy-colored type stuff. So it's funny they're bringing these back. I actually think it's a huge part of Magic to have the allies and enemy colors, and it's a good card to come back, or good mechanic to come back, in my opinion. We have the Silverback Shaman, which is a 5/4. When it dies, draw a card. Trample, kind of filler. Leyline of Sanctity, same thing as Leyline of Void. This card will get crushed, and then it's time to pick back up. So let's look at the Loxodon. The Loxodon Lifeslinger is 4/6 for 6 mana. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you may have your life total become equal to the total toughness among creatures you control. So there's a card that pairs very well with the Felidar Silverin. Should be quite demanded in EDH. And then it gets plus X where X is your life total. So this can be a finisher too in control-based decks. So you gain a ton of life. At least you gain 6 life. If you've been stalling off the board and have a high enough life total, then you can get plus X where X is your life total. And yeah, theoretically win the game next turn if you're higher life total than your opponent. So I think casuals are going to love this. The Timmies are going to flock to it. And it's going to be a decent commander card. So if it does go bulk roll price, you should definitely look at it as a potential spec. We have Planar Outburst. It gets a reprint. It's been printed a ton of times, though. Angel Vitality. If you would gain life, you gain that 11 extra life plus 1, and then it gets +2/+2 if you have 25 or more life. Kind of filler. Have a hard time thinking this is going to see play in Constructed, as even a 4/4 flying for 3 is, I don't know, maybe it actually is playable. Yeah, we'll have to see if a life gain strategy can be spawned because of Angel Vitality and some of the life gain stuff. Devout Decree, 2 mana, exile target creature or planeswalker that's black or red. So this one is the fixed version of the Celestial Purge. Other than Celestial Purge, I think is just better. Yep. You get a Scry one, but exile a black or red permanent is yeah, this one won't see play over Celestial Purge in Modern. Instant speed and be able to get any permanent, definitely better. But of course, this is going to be a nice sideboard card for Standard to keep black and red decks under control. All right, so Disenchant gets a reprint. The Atemsis, jeez, I have a hard time saying that one. Atemsis, All-Seeing. 6 mana for a 4/5, flying, draw 2 cards and discard a card, and when it deals combat damage, you may reveal your hand. If you have 6 different converted mana costs, you win the game, or that player loses the game. So kind of commander jank for this alternate win condition. Of course, the Timmies are going to love this type of card. I do see this card going down to bulk rare prices. I think as a control finisher, it's just too tough to make it work. You are netting up by drawing, but you have to tap it. I don't think it's where control wants to be. Aether Gust, you choose choose target spell or permanent that's red or green. Its owner puts on top or bottom of their library. So again, pretty decent card for, it is removal for 2 mana instant speed. That one just seems so much better when comparison to Devout Decree. I guess you get the Scry for Devout Decree, but Aether Gust is removal. You get to put it on the top or bottom. Oh, its owner puts it on top or bottom. Never mind. So your opponent can put it back on top, but it is still pretty good creature removal. We get Negate reprinted with, that does look like the same artwork that was from the Negate from Rivals of Ixalan or Ixalan. The Octo Prophet, just a filler Scry 2 when it comes into play. Unsummoned gets a reprint. Now here's where it gets really interesting, and I'm going to have to do a whole entire video. If you come over to my Rogue Market channel, I'm going to be looking at cards that do work around Kygar Wind's Fury. So I think this is going to be, it's going to have a hard time having a commander that's printed out of this set. This is going to have more focus than the Kygar Wind's Fury. So this is a 4 mana for a 3/3. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. And then you have Sacrifice the Spirit to add red to your mana pool. So this essentially can enable Storm by itself. You can cast a bunch of non-creature spells and then sacrifice them, especially their red cantrip spells, to then sacrifice the Spirit to then continue to cast creatures. If you have like a Blood Artist type effect, which they can exist in red, so Impact Tremors, for example, or Perforos, you can essentially just create enough of these spells. I mean, even standard with Gutter Snipe, you can do it to just effectively go through your entire deck and kill your opponents through the damage that are spawned by the spirit tokens coming into play. Where this gets interesting, though, especially for Commander, is the Jeskai Ascendancy, because it's creating the creatures that then get untapped by Jeskai and get bigger by Jeskai's Ascendancy, which seems very interesting for that particular deck. So we're going to keep our eye on that. I'm going to dedicate an entire video to Kaikar Wind's Fury and look at cards that do have a lot of synergy with this particular commander, because I think as every set comes out, there's always going to be that commander that causes cards to spike up, and this so far is the best one out of the set. So yep, we'll do an entire video for it. All right, we have Renee, Angel of Rebirth, or Rhine. I don't know how they pronounce this. Renee, Angel of Rebirth, 5 mana for a 5/4. Flying other multicolored creatures you control at +1/+0, and whenever another multicolored creature you control dies, return it to its owner's hand at the beginning of next end step. This also should be a very popular commander. So this feels very similar to Marquesa, other than it doesn't come back to the battlefield. So think about, like, I'm trying to think, there is an Eternal Witness, right? That's a multicolored. I know there's cards that have a lot of card advantage. Even think about cards that exist even right now in Standard that have a lot of value when they come out as multicolored creatures in that color combination. Lots of green cards replace themselves or gain life or do something. This is going to be a very powerful, what's that, Kazali Pride Mage for Commander, for example, with the Angel of Rebirth. You get to destroy an artifact or enchantment per... yeah, that's crazy. So we'll probably do a video with this one as well. So keep your eye on Kazali Pride Mage. That's the first one that's going to go in every one of these decks because of how powerful that synergy is. So both Kaikar and Angel of Rebirth will do a video on the Rogue Market with cards, top 10 cards that synergize, or I think will go up with this particular commander. All right, Corpse Knight, we get another sort of Blood Artist type effect. Well, instead of dying whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life. And this one does not say non-token, so any sort of token generation, so think of Oketra right now in the mix, or just even all the cards that are currently in Guilds of Ravnica that replace themselves. So the Hunted Witness, the Tithe Taker, there's another black... Oh, there's a great one that synergizes perfectly Corpse Knight. Here's another argument for Hero of Precinct 1. Hero of Precinct 1 generates a ton of tokens every time you cast a multicolored spell. This is a multicolored spell. So effectively, if you cast the Corpse Knight off of Hero of Precinct 1, you're not going to get the trigger because the human ones are before the Corpse Knight. But every other multicolored spell that is cast is going to drain your opponent's a life. So that's very interesting. You already have another one as well. So this is another card that I can add to one of my Liliana decks. It is a zombie too. So this one actually might be able to spawn my Liliana Untouched by Death deck in Standard, because it's a zombie that you can reanimate quite easily even without the... nope, there's still a zombie you need a 0-drop to cast. I think without the Arcane Adaptation. But yeah, it's still a good one though. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life. So there's got to be ways to break it in Standard, even without Liliana's. These type of cards definitely do see play. It's both a zombie and a knight, which both have relevant creature types right now in the format. There's Knight Tribal that's just about tier, like just about competitive, and this might be one that can spawn it over the top. It has a lot of synergy with History of Benalia. So Corpse Knight comes out, History of Benalia, you drain your opponent for a life. Next turn you drain again, and it gets a boost, and attacking with get +2/+1 in Vigilance. Yeah, this one a very good card. Creeping Trailblazer, 2 mana for 2/2, gives other elemental creatures +1/+0, and it gets +1/+1 if you activate it for each elemental creature you control. Young Pyromancer, there's some good elemental spawning creatures in the Magic format, so I think this one will spawn some tribal decks. It's nice to have another Lord with it. Elementals is very interesting with like a humans type shell. What I mean by that is you have the Ancient Ziggurats and the Unclaimed Territories and the Aether Vials. Elementals is almost there, and if you don't believe me, try it. Go and make a 5-color Elementals deck, and there are some powerful Elementals in the history of Modern, and this very much feels like a Thalia's Lieutenant type effect that buffs them up. There are some great 1-drops, 2-drops, 3-drops, very, very powerful Elementals with the Vial type effect. You even have the Eidolon that can be thrown in here because I believe that's an elemental as well, right? The Eidolon of Great Revel. Let me go check that one out. Is that a satyr or elemental, or is it an elemental satyr? We have Eidolon of the Great Revel. Oh, it's a spirit. I was thinking it was elemental for some reason. Womp womp. Okay, it doesn't work in that, but there is a lot of elementals throughout the history of Magic that work with this. I think they do need a 2-drop Lord, so it could actually spawn an entire deck. We'll have to look at that again in another video to see what we can actually make with the modern elementals. So I am going to be trying to bring back, after the summer's over, I am going to be trying to bring back Brews on Rogue Deck Builder. I know I should change the name to this of something else channel. I mean, I have my Rogue Market for the finance side of things, but I am going to be bringing back Brews. It's a pledge I've been making for a long time and falling short on that, but I'm back in the mood to actually brewing decks and actually competing. Been playing some more Arena, been playing some MTGO, and it's been fun to brew. So that'll be on my short list, is a modern elemental deck, probably with Aether Vial and very similar shell to humans, to see how viable it is. All right, we have the Imperial Eagle, a 3 mana for a 2/3. Other creatures you control with flying, get +1/+1. A little bit higher of a Lord, but it's still not that bad as a 2/3. There are a lot of very, very efficient flying creatures. The white has a bunch of 1-drops, so does blue, that pair very well with this type of creature. See, if birds can actually ever be a deck, this is another Lord that can push them further towards that. We have the Ironroot Warlord, a 3 mana for a star 5. Its power is equal number of creature control, and 5 mana to create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. This is a good stall breaker in limited, but I have a hard time seeing this play in constructed. We have the Risen Reef, 3 mana for a 1/1. Whenever it or another elemental enters battlefield under your control, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, you put it on the battlefield tapped. If you don't, put that card on the battlefield, put it in your hand. So this is actually a very, very good engine with the elementals. So here we go. This is very good with Aether Vial too. It just continues to keep your hand. Oh wow, yeah. So I've played some elemental decks in the past. There's the one that puts +1 counters on elementals. The Raging. Oh, we'll look at it. We'll look at another thing, but I think this is actually legit to actually go back and see if that's something that can happen in modern format. Then we have the Cryptic Caves. This one is actually, I think, a very, very good card. If it goes down to bulk price for uncommon, so I mean 10-cent mark, I think you should be picking these up. You add a color expand your mana pool for tap. No drawback, doesn't come into play tapped or nothing. And then you can sacrifice to draw a card for 1. Just 1 in tap. Yes, you do have to have 5 more lands, but in a Crucible Worlds type format where a bunch of commander decks run these type of things, once you get up to the 5 lands, you can cantrip it away and play it again. It's a pretty good engine right there. So do not ignore this card. Do not ignore the foils. The foils do become bulk price as well. This is a card you should be picking up. Same to say with a lot of these other uncommons. I think all their foils are very lucrative, as these are going to be heavily played in casual decks and commander decks, and a couple of these actually do look like they have potential of spawning decks themselves. So kind of a longer Rogue Market, actually not too bad for Rogue Market. There are some goodies coming out of this set. So I'm so far loving this set for the Core 2020. Again, it's sandwiched in between some very powerful or very sought after products that are like spell books, and we have commander sets that are coming out. We have a rotation that's actually not that long. In the future, we have summer months that typically are the worst selling for Magic the Gathering sets. So I think this one's a goodie. I don't think this is going to be another Core 2019. I think it's going to be knock out of the park even what they have, even the ley lines, to really spawn the value. And hopefully they have a good land cycle in here. I still think what is it? It's pairing. Well, we have enemy colored stuff too, but it looks like it's more focused on ally colors than enemy colors. So I'm hoping we get like the Scars of Mirrodin type lands. This is an easy set to throw them in because cores don't really have a theme. They can be from any plane. And if they're going to bring in like the Copperline Gorge type cards, this is probably the place to do it, and then have some sort of reference to New Phyrexia. So that's my prediction. I think we'll see the ally colored cycle. They're expensive. They need to elevate the price of modern for those particular cards. They need to reprint. I think they're going to be here to definitely sell the Core Set 2020. I think that Core Set 2019 was a huge wake-up call for them, that they can't just print a couple reprints like Crucible Worlds to try to sell the set, and they need some guarantees. And that's why they put the ley lines here. That's why I also think they're going to put the fast lands in this particular set. And we hope you enjoyed this video, and I'm interested in your comments in the comment section below for cards you think are going to be either duds or are going to be powerhouses. And yeah, we'll get to the bottom of this. Definitely go check out my second channel, Rogue Market. We'll be producing a lot of content with these spoilers coming out for the Core 2020 season. Anyway, thanks for watching.